Good afternoon. Welcome to the Brain Health Exercise and Ping Pong webinar. We are so glad that you could join us today. My name is Maureen McCumsey, and I am one of the founders of Ping Pong for Good, which simply stated is a movement for brain health that is powered by table tennis, which is also known as ping pong. And I actually like to say ping pong because it's just so darn fun to say. Today's event is all about the science and all the benefits behind exercise on the brain, and especially ping pong. Now, I know I was really surprised to learn just how much ping pong really is the perfect brain game for any age and at any level, and especially for those with brain decline and those living with degenerative brain diseases like Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, and MS. This is the first of a series of events to be hosted by Ping Pong for Good. Future webinars and live streaming events will include basic skills training. And tune in next month for an event with our partner, PONG-FIT. I saw Justin Bookey has joined us today. There will be recommendations on how to maximize the benefits of playing ping pong and inspirational stories, of which there are many of those whose lives have really been improved by this incredible game. There will be some time for Q&A at the end of the presentation, so be sure to type in your comments and any questions into the chat. We sure hope that you'll sign up for updates at pingpongforgood.org and follow us on Instagram and Facebook. We really want you to be a part of this growing community. I'm going to hand it over to Ryan, and we're going to jump into the science. Ryan Glatt is a trainer and brain health coach with over a decade of experience in the health and fitness industry. We hope that you find it valuable, and without further delay, I am going to now hand it over to Ryan. Welcome, Ryan.
Thanks so much, Maureen. Very excited to be here and delivering Ping Pong for Good's first inaugural educational webinar. And the first of many. I'm very excited to work with Ping Pong for Good. Ping pong, it's like puppies. Who doesn't love ping pong? And so I have a personal story behind it. Ping pong growing up was where my entire family could come together and not argue, set our differences aside, and just have a good time. So ping pong's been a staple of my personal and social life for many, many years. And I was very eager to speak with Maureen and Trent, who founded Ping Pong for Good, to see how I can make it more a part of my professional career. And so you'll see very well how that integrates. And so I'm extremely excited to deliver this presentation. Maureen is right. Some things I say, I talk very fast, mostly out of passion to get this information out there, recognizing that it can be rewatched for further integration if desired. And hopefully some things will go over your head, under your head, but I think some things will go in your head as well. As we start to internalize some of this valuable information and understand why something like ping pong might be so good for us. So Ping Pong for Good is, just for those who have not understood exactly what it is a philanthropic organization to increase the awareness about the many benefits of playing ping pong for those with and without cognitive and neurological conditions. To learn more, you can go to pingpongforgood.org. A little bit about my background. I have a master's in applied neuroscience, a bachelor's in exercise science, and I work at a place called the Pacific Brain Health Center in Santa Monica, California, alongside an amazing clinical and research team, including neurologists, neuropsychologists, psychiatrists. And what I run is a program called the Fit Brain Program, which looks at the effects of combined cognitive and physical exercise to enhance cognition, balance, and other motor outcomes in older adults with and without cognitive and neurological conditions. In other words, I play video games with people to help them feel and move better. I started on this journey when I was very young, and I'm a millennial. I was born in 1991, and I was very overweight growing up as a kid, and I was addicted to video games, but I turned this into a positive by losing weight off a game called Dance Dance Revolution. And that sort of kickstarted my interest in neuroscience and cognition and behavior and exercise. Became a trainer, was going towards physical therapy school, went a bit of a different direction and became a body worker, and then looked towards neuroscience to incorporating all these different disciplines, including health coaching together, and sort of ended up where I am now. So I have a strong passion and education and background in the area of aging, brain health, exercise, and cognitive training. Let's just briefly talk about one of the problems. This is not the problem, but certainly a very big one. An estimated 5.8 million Americans age 65 and older are living with Alzheimer's dementia in 2020. 80% are age 75 or older, and 2/3 are women. By 2050, the number of people age 65 and older with Alzheimer's dementia may grow to a projected 13.8 million. Alzheimer's disease is the 6th leading cause of death in the United States, the 5th leading cause of death among those 65 and older, and the leading cause of disability and poor health. Unless there's a treatment to slow, stop, or prevent the disease, in 2050, Alzheimer's is projected to cost more than 1.1 trillion US dollars. And this is not just about Alzheimer's disease. This is about neurodegenerative conditions as a whole. So if these statistics are scary and convincing enough to evoke action and curiosity of how we might slow or stop this to a degree, this is further amplified by statistics that I was not prepared with, including Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, older adults with cognitive impairments without dementia or Alzheimer's disease, and individuals just looking to slow cognitive decline in general. So even in the absence of those statistics, the more statistics we add on these things, on these neurodegenerative conditions, cognitive conditions, neurological conditions, and just recognizing that the brain ages and the body ages, and we want to slow that down, it becomes more and more convincing to do something about this. In addition, we all have this ability to change our brain. Just like we can change our bodies, our brains have this inherent ability to change called neuroplasticity. Now, neuroplasticity is the ability for the brain to change in response to experiences and is very available to us early in adulthood, i.e. childhood, and is still available in adulthood. However, it requires more effort. So often what I spend most of my time doing is coaching older adults with and without cognitive and neurological conditions to do more effortful things in the form of exercise and or cognitive training. Of course, those things are more enjoyable when they are enjoyable. And ping pong is certainly one of those activities. But what happens as we age, and I know this is strange coming from a millennial, but typically we tend to slow down. We tend to do less cognitively, i.e. retirement, and we tend to do less physically, i.e. exercise and physical activity. But that actually needs to be the opposite. As we free up more time, we need to spend more time investing in our own brains and bodies, regardless of your age. That goes for millennials and it goes for baby boomers to engage in more effortful, beneficial, and therapeutic cognitive and or physical activities. And the reason we would want to do that is because we want to boost what's called cognitive reserve, which is essentially your brain's gas tank. That the fuller this gas tank is, the longer you can avoid things like neurodegenerative conditions or neuropathologies, which we'll define. So in the upper left-hand corner, we have modifiable health factors. That includes sleep, stress management, exercise and physical activity, and nutrition. We also have level of education. The higher your level of educational attainment, usually the higher your cognitive reserve. Of course, we get a lot of individuals at the center here with PhDs that have dementia. So it doesn't guarantee that you don't get dementia, but it is a contributor. We also have social support. I think we've all appreciated during quarantine how important social support really is. Positive affect, in other words, maintaining a good mood, in other words, good mental health. We know that's extremely important, but also stimulating activities and novel experiences. And then of course, cognitive training. These are all things that can contribute to cognitive reserve, lend themselves to improving cognition, or at least slowing them from decreasing, and therefore improving behavior and activities of daily living. In other words, transfer to your real world life. And what my proposition is, how can we take a modifiable health factor like exercise, combine it with social support, combine it with positive affect, AKA you enjoy it, and make sure it's an activity that's novel and stimulating and cognitively demanding. So if we did those things, and if exercise is a poly pill, as people call it, it's a pill that does multiple things, then we make it a more potent poly pill. Specifically, if we're talking about the brain, exercise is a neuro-poly pill, and how do you make the dosage of that neuro-poly pill more impactful? And the way I would say that we could explore doing that is by combining certain types of physical activities that are social, that you enjoy, that are novel, that are also cognitive stimulating. Spoiler alert, ping pong is probably one of those activities. With that said, if we boost our cognitive reserve, we increase the span of the trajectory that we may not avoid dementia, but we can prolong neurodegeneration as a whole, the higher our cognitive reserve. Of course, if we experience things like neurological conditions, we get diagnosed with a neurological condition, stroke, traumatic brain injury, that can lower cognitive reserve. And even in those conditions, we're looking to boost it back up and sort of rehabilitate that cognitive reserve to the best of our ability. Now, we've spoken about neuroplasticity, and I want to say that there's different kinds of neuroplasticity because I don't think that it's well understood, at least in the general public. Neurogenesis is the creation of new brain cells. So our brain is made up of brain cells, and the ability to create new brain cells is called neurogenesis. This is structural neuroplasticity. And there's a lot of heated debate in the scientific community if this is really available in older adults, in other regions of the brain besides areas just like the hippocampus, which is an area of the brain responsible for learning and memory, and tends to decline with age in terms of size and function. And that decline is accelerated by neurodegenerative conditions. And the hippocampus is very sensitive to lifestyle interventions. So with chronic stress, with lack of sleep, with sedentary behavior and a lack of exercise, it can shrink. But the opposite of those, good sleep, healthy diet, stress management, exercise, it tends to grow or at least maintain its size and function to a degree. And so it's been studied in humans and in animals that neurogenesis is available in this region. However, we're not entirely sure, and once again, it's kind of a controversial area, and I'll let you decide, but we're not entirely sure if neurogenesis is available regardless of your age in all areas of the brain. But it is a type of brain change or neuroplasticity that can occur. Maybe what we're more interested in, and this is what does apply to everybody, is functional neuroplasticity. And functional neuroplasticity is the brain's ability to change in response to experiences, but within the synaptic and the electrical connections between these neurons. So new synapses, a process called synaptogenesis, can actually be created and proliferated by things like exercise and cognitive training. So we're modulating, here's neuron A, here's neuron B, the bridge between them is the synapse, and by talking to each other, theoretically, they can become stronger, a process or a system called Hebbian plasticity. If you've heard neurons that wire together, fire together, that's where that statement comes from. Now, with repetition or practice, these synapses can become strengthened, and on the other end, they can become weakened. Now, synaptic modification can happen in milliseconds. It doesn't mean it's significant. It doesn't mean the size of your brain changes in milliseconds, but just these synapses talking to each other, when you're doing something novel, for instance, that synaptic modification is happening in milliseconds. But the actual structural correlate of that, the branching of synapses and dendrites occurs over several hours. The creation of new brain cells, if feasible, depending on the area of the brain and who we're talking about, can take several days. And networks of neurons, whether they be structural neuroplastic changes, i.e. creation of new neurons, or functional neuroplastic changes, creation of new synaptic networks, can take several weeks or months. And so when we're considering, well, how long before I expect results from an intervention like exercise or ping pong, keep this in your mind, pun intended, that it can take several weeks and months to spur these more significant changes. Now, structural brain changes, if they were to occur, also takes more of the several months, sometimes several weeks, as little as several weeks. But to say increasing the size of your hippocampus as the result of aerobic exercise can take several weeks and months. So let's review the effects of activities and exercise on the brain at different levels. So the first level is the behavioral level. And when we talk about behavior, what do we mean? Well, when we're talking about exercising to improve brain health, we're looking to feel something. We're looking to change something. And usually the thing that we're after is cognition and or mood. Usually we'd all like to be in a good mood, and we usually all like to be functioning optimally with our attention, our memory, and our reaction time or our processing speed. So these are changes at the behavioral level. So if I exercise just once, you're likely to feel better. You might even feel a little sharper. If I'm exercising for weeks and months, those are likely to stick. Those modifications in your mood, your mental health, your cognition are likely to stay as long as you keep doing the behavior with some diminishing returns. So those are changes at the behavioral level. But exercise also affects the brain at the micro level. We've talked about neurons and we've talked about synapses, but the way those things actually change and proliferate is by the modification in neurochemicals, things like dopamine and acetylcholine, by the modification of blood vessels. Things, your brain is a vascular network. And so within this rich vascular network, increasing blood flow increases the blood flow. I know that sounds a bit redundant, but it can also signal blood flow changes structurally in the brain's vascular network, a process called angiogenesis, the ability to create new blood vessels or capillaries in your brain. But all of these things are also proliferated by growth factors. And growth factors include one that you've probably heard of before, BDNF, or brain-derived neurotrophic factor, and other proteins and hormones that get released in the brain, but also released in the body by skeletal muscle and cardiac muscle that go through the blood, cross the blood-brain barrier, go into the brain and say, dude, I want you to grow a little bit more, or I want you to function a little bit better. Over time, these functional changes can precede structural changes that we hope might show up on a brain scan. And those are at the macro changes or the macro level of the brain. Changes in structure, such as my hippocampus grew a little bit, or changes in function, such as my prefrontal cortex, which we'll define a little bit later, got more efficient in its activity. So both functional and structural changes at a higher level occur at the macro level. So usually when you hear about exercise in the brain, you only hear about one of these mechanisms. You hear about BDNF, or you hear about blood flow, or you hear about the hippocampus in isolation. But in reality, it's a multi-level complex effect on the brain from exercise or as a result of exercise and physical activity. That's amazing. Not a lot of drugs can do that. In fact, no drugs can do that. And not a lot of interventions can do that either. Of course, there are other lifestyle interventions that play a similar role at these different levels of the brain, but exercise is really recognized as one of the most evidence-based interventions that can have multi-level effects in the brain here. So what are the guidelines? What is this dosage? If the mechanisms are there, if it's beginning to be well understood, what do we actually do about it? And when can we expect results? So the Physical Activity Guidelines for Americans, second edition, states that for substantial health benefits, in the most recent version, the second edition, does include brain health benefits, which is a big needle for us. It's a big needle to move for these national organizations to recommend exercise for brain health. So that's a big victory there. But for substantial health benefits, adults should do at least 150 minutes, which is the equivalent of 2.5 hours, to 300 minutes, which is the equivalent to 5 hours a week, of moderate to vigorous intensity aerobic exercise or physical activity or equivalent. I know that's a mouthful, but it's helpful to know exactly how many minutes research is saying we need exercise for in order to sustain these health benefits: emotional, cognitive, physiological, muscular, so on and so forth, and cardiovascular, of course. So let's break this down a little bit. If I was to do 150 minutes a week of exercise, that could be 3 times a week of 45 to 60 minutes. That could be 5 times a week of 30 minutes. There's a lot of ways to configure that. And that would be the minimum. If you're not hitting the minimum, your goal should be to get to the minimum. That's where we're going to expect that we have more significant changes in brain health. It doesn't mean anything less than that is not beneficial, but this is the minimum recommended amount of exercise that we should seek to adopt. There's additional benefits for more minutes. So if you're at 150, there are additional health benefits to going to 300. And there's also additional benefits for other types of exercise, such as strength training, which not enough people do. It does have unique brain health benefits, and neuromotor training, which is the category that we're going to focus on today. Neuromotor training, there's a lot of synonyms for it, like skill-based exercise or motor training or coordinative training, is the one that most people aren't familiar with. As we start to describe what's a part of neuromotor, dance, sports, martial arts, brain-body games, things of that regard, you'll start to become more familiar with those things. Oh, I know what that is. I didn't know it belonged to a category of exercise. So we're going to want aerobic exercise, resistance exercise, and neuromotor. And we're going to bring that home at the end of the presentation here. So that's all fine and dandy, but should we just do one type of exercise? Well, people are saying that multi-domain exercise programs, meaning ones that consist of multiple modalities of exercise, are more likely to slow down cognitive decline than a shorter single modality. So most people look at exercise as, oh, I check off the box, I'm done, I don't need to do anything more. But just like if I just ate broccoli and I said I had a healthy diet, that's not enough. We all know, regardless of your knowledge, that's not enough. So what are the ingredients we need to put into an exercise program to reap the most benefits to our health, including our brain health? And so that one of those characteristics is a multi-domain program. So we need more than one domain of exercise. So what would be better than just aerobic exercise would be aerobic and resistance. What would be better than that is aerobic, resistance, and neuromotor. So that's where we're going to be going in this presentation. In addition, a systematic review of, I think, over 1,200 studies showed that 52 hours of exercise in older adults with and without cognitive impairments. So this includes normal adults with normal cognitive aging, older adults with dementia, older adults with mild cognitive impairment. They found that 52 hours of exercise led to improvements, significant improvements in processing speed and executive functioning, which is an umbrella term for different types of cognitive functions, such as planning, organizing, short-term memory, things of that regard. We'll define that later. It took 52 hours to get significant benefits in those domains, regardless of the type of exercise. So it could have been Tai Chi, it could be tennis, it could be resistance training. It didn't matter as long as they hit 52 hours of exercise. Now, the next logical question, which is, okay, 52 hours over what amount of time? Well, that's the thing. It depends on your preferences, your commitment, your access, but it could be 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, 2 years. Ideally 3 to 6 months. And it doesn't mean once you hit that 52 hours, there's diminishing returns or you stop benefiting. But that's sort of the minimum required amount of exercise to reap those significant cognitive benefits, at least in older adults. So if anyone has any questions about that, feel free to use the chat or the Q&A. But I hope that makes sense that we want at least 150 minutes. We want it to be multi-domain. And we want to expect that after about 52 hours, that's when we get, okay, I'll probably feel beneficial changes, but we need at least that to get significant changes in cognition. Of course, keep going, don't stop there. In addition, not just cognition, but remember, mood is a part of that behavioral level change. Who couldn't want a good mood, especially right now? Well, we know that exercising leads to increased energy, improved confidence, improved self-esteem, sleep, mood, stress. So we can't deny that exercise is one of the most powerful antidepressants, as well as a very powerful drug for mental health. And even in combination with actual treatment, pharmaceutical treatment of mental health conditions, the outcomes are even better. So it's not to say exercise is a replacement for medication, but it enhances the effect of medication should they be necessary or recommended by your doctor. Now, what's wrong with just aerobic exercise? Because you'll see a lot of coverage in the news saying that aerobic exercise is the best form of exercise for your brain. And even when we're talking about ping pong, we have to avoid statements like that's the best or dance is the best exercise for your brain. We should be skeptical of statements like that. But what also we should be skeptical of is saying that aerobic exercise is the best one, we settle there, we're done. But Dr. Adele Diamond, who's been sort of nicknamed the godmother of executive functioning, has said that we want to go simply beyond moving to moving with thought. And I will say that many of us in this presentation and many people who are exercising, exercise without paying attention. And this could be riding a bike while watching TV, walking while spacing out. And that's not to say it's not valuable. You're still getting benefits. And sometimes we need to shut off our minds. We need to just kind of let our minds wander and engage what's called the default mode network and just let it wander. That is valuable. And then there is a place and a time for that. However, I think most of us would agree that a lot of the exercise routines we engage in are not that cognitively demanding. So researchers have called for this and have identified that most exercise activities require little thought, things like cardio machines, where you don't have to think much, you're just moving on a track, basic weight machines, brisk walking. These are very helpful. These are still very beneficial for your brain. Don't let me convince you that the opposite is true. But perhaps if we want to slow down cognitive decline, we need to do a little bit more. And remember that cognitive reserve chart, we want cognitive stimulation and novel and stimulating activities. So some research is saying that cognitively engaging exercise might have, and I say might, it's not conclusive, have a stronger effect on cognition than non-cognitively engaging exercise. More research is needed. So we want to engage in exercises that train and challenge our executive functions, our short-term memory, adapting to unexpected circumstances, controlling our impulses, shifting our attention, things that are found in dance, sports, and martial arts. And while we may not engage in all of these, what can we learn from these activities? What sorts of skills and demands and social contact and environments are present in these activities that we can bring in to our exercise programs? Now, most people here would not think, okay, I'm just going to go play a sport unless that sport was extremely accessible, extremely fun, and spanned generations. Might be ping pong. But also we want exercise that bring joy, pride, and confidence. So things you enjoy are going to be even more beneficial. And a lot of people avoid these neuromotor forms of exercise like dance because they're embarrassing, because they're not good at them. But as I will present earlier, that being a loser makes you win, because those novel experiences is what elicits your brain to work harder, to engage in more cognitive stimulus. So we'll define what novel activities look like. Before we do, it's helpful to look at the different types of skills. So on the right, we have closed skills. Closed skills are stable and predictable. Movements have a clear beginning and end, and the performer, or the exerciser, you, knows what to do and when. Open skills, on the other hand, the environment's constantly changing, movements have to be continually adapted, and they're predominantly externally paced. For example, ping pong, but also other sports like tennis, dance, soccer, things of that regard. And then closed skill is your more traditional exercise machines, cardio machines, running, jogging, swimming. Now, pop quiz, you don't have to actually answer this, but in your head you may. Which one is more beneficial for the brain? Right? You're probably thinking close or open skills because I've been selling you on that. But don't forget that there's this whole body of research saying how important and how beneficial aerobic exercise, which is typically a closed skill, is for the brain. Even some forms of resistance training are closed skills. So it's not about which one, it's about both. But it's also recognizing that most exercise programs have closed skills, but don't have open skill activities. So if you're missing one or the other, seek to incorporate one or the other. And once again, in my experience, most of the time here, we're missing open skill activities, which of course, what's a great way to access open skill demands? Ping pong. Now, remember when I said losers win? So there's different stages of motor learning. So let's say you're brand new to ping pong. What's going to happen? Well, the first stage of motor learning is called the cognitive stage. It's appropriately named because it requires a lot of cognitive demands. You have to pay attention. It's a little awkward. It's a little frustrating. This is where most people quit activities because they're not good at them. But this is just the natural course of motor learning. Babies don't quit because they fall down. It's awkward, it's open, and they need to figure things out. There's a lot of problem solving and learning happening. Then the associative stage, that's suppressed a little bit. That awkwardness, that failure, it gets a little bit more suppressed. Things get a little bit more fluid. And then the autonomous stage where it almost becomes automatic, if not completely automatic, where you don't have to think about it as much. You're more able to enter into that flow state. Now, if we see on the right-hand side, we see something called working memory, which is short-term memory. It's part of executive functions, and it's always updating information based on what's happening in the environment. So you can see that working memory loads are the highest at the cognitive stage of motor learning. This is why we should pursue, if your goal is brain health and cognitive health, this is why we should pursue novel activities, especially things like ping pong. Now, if you've been doing playing tennis for many years, but you never increased the level or went from singles to doubles, you can have novelty within activities you're already accustomed to. And so this isn't just if it's a brand new activity altogether, you can seek novelty and seek more skill learning within existing activities that you're already doing. So for example, going from weight machines to functional training with dumbbells or kettlebells, for instance. So there's a lot of ways to skin this cat, if you will. I just want to check out the Q&A for a second. So someone said, I can't find anyone to play with. Is there any benefit to playing on your own versus someone else or the wall? That's a great question. I want to say that either are going to be beneficial for you because even if you're playing against a wall, you don't know exactly how that ball is coming back. And so that's still open skill. And so let me actually go back to this. So if we were playing against a wall, it would be less open skill, but not entirely closed skill because it's still ping pong. So I'd say it's probably in the middle, but as soon as I add another person, there's more unpredictability to it. And therefore it's probably more open skill. So the skill spectrum is exactly what it is. It's a spectrum. And so just because you play with a wall doesn't mean it's not beneficial and it doesn't have cognitive demands and it's not fun or it's not therapeutic. It still is. But we would also recognize that when we add a person whenever we can, understanding that we're not always with people, when we might want to play ping pong, then we would understand that it just becomes more open skill. If you're a little confused about the 52 hours and 150 minutes a week, we will break it down a little bit more by giving you examples after. The 52 hours is over months and months of time. So let's say you average about, I'm terrible at math, but let's say you average 3 to 5 hours a week. Just divide that amount of time that you're spending on exercise weekly by the 52 hours, and you'll see how many weeks it takes you to get to those 52 hours. The 150 minutes a week, not hours, but minutes a week, can be split up in multiple ways, as I said. It could be 3 45 to 60-minute sessions per week. So Monday, Wednesday, Friday, I do 45 to 60 minutes of exercise. And then, or it could be, Monday through Friday, 30 minutes a day, 5 times a week, I'm doing exercise, that's 150 minutes. So there's a lot of ways to configure that. There's no right answer. It really depends on the individual, your preferences, etc. Okay, if there's any more Q&A, please let me know. Let's continue. So why would we consider combining cognitive challenges with exercise? Well, these little red dots represent neurons, and these neurons do die off with age. So as we age, our brains and our bodies tend to decline. There's no secret there. So with no training, if we did absolutely nothing, we would lose neurons. We know that. If we did exercise, we can gain neurons, and this is a whole theoretical concept here, so it's not actual fact. But if we do exercise, theoretically, we gain new neurons, but we may not keep them all. If we do cognitive training, remember, you keep what you train, that synaptic plasticity, we're maintaining neurons by engaging them, but combining them, theoretically, we create the new neurons from exercise and we integrate them and elicit their survival by having this simultaneous cognitive demands. So that's one theoretical construct for why combining exercise with cognitive tasks might be beneficial. Now let's appreciate this from different modalities of exercise. On the upper left-hand side, we have aerobic and strength training, which we call physical training as a whole category. And remember, aerobic and strength are 2 modalities. On the right-hand side, we have motor training. That could be balance and flexibility, a category I call mind-body exercise, yoga, tai chi, qigong, things of that regard. And then coordination exercise. That could be tennis, boxing, so on and so forth. And the combination of physical and motor training is skill learning. And appropriately, I have a ping pong player here. And the physical training, what that elicits is metabolic demand. So contracting skeletal muscle tissue, releasing those growth factors, blood flow to the brain. That results in what's called global neuroplasticity. We know we're just generally stimulating the brain and getting general blood flow, neurochemicals, general growth factors, but we're not targeting anything specifically. Although there is research saying it does target areas of the brain like the hippocampus, but that's a presentation for another time. On the other hand, with motor training, we have neuromuscular demands, connection of brain and body with task-specific neuroplasticity, which means if I'm going to play ping pong, I'm going to develop parts of my brain responsible for playing ping pong. And so with understanding the benefits and the demands of certain types of exercise, we may be able to target certain domains in regions of the brain, as well as domains of cognition. And there also might be an evolutionary reason for incorporating activities that combine brain and body, because there's something called the adaptive capacity model, which suggests that we evolved this way. We evolved this way. When we were hunting animals, we had to adapt to different stimuli because we didn't know where the heck that animal was going. So we didn't hunt throwing a spear against a wall. We had to go and hunt that animal. It's kind of like the other person that we're opposing in a sport like ping pong, for instance. So we had to use our executive functioning, our problem solving, our cognitive flexibility, decision-making, planning. We also had to use our sensory and attention systems, our eyes, our ears, our vestibular system. We also had to use our spatial navigation. So memorizing areas of our environment. Where are we going? How do we navigate this environment? And how do I move my body in that environment? We also had motor control and playing. We used a tool. We're just replacing a spear with a paddle, right? But we also had to go from slower speeds to faster speeds. So walking, crouching, but running and eventually sprinting, all of which utilize different energy systems. So you can appreciate the variability here and also the compatibility of both the brain and the body in response to a goal, in this case, hunting. We're just substituting the antelope with ping pong. And so there are many benefits to ping pong, some anecdotal, some have been researched. We would imagine that ping pong improves or at least demands mental acuity. We'll dive into that more. Reflexes, of course, burns calories. Who doesn't want to get ready for summer, right? With ping pong. Easy on the joints and encourages social bonding. And it's also translatory across generations. There's virtually no sport that I can think of where an individual who's 90 can play with an individual who's 5. And that's a really big thing because intergenerational contact isn't so common in the modern era. So that's really important that there is social bonding, but it's not just people like you, but it can be people like you, but also people completely different than you. And that's what I love about ping pong is it really brings people together. So what populations, in my field, we call them special populations, but what populations can benefit from ping pong? Well, it could be general healthy aging. It could be general healthy development. It could be Parkinson's disease, dementia and Alzheimer's disease, multiple sclerosis, stroke, traumatic brain injury, ADHD, autism, and more. If it's not listed here, then it could be on the list. This is just some examples of who could benefit from ping pong. And this is why I'm so excited to partner with Ping Pong for Good, is because we're trying to bring ping pong both in awareness and supply and training to these populations and more. Someone asked, should hunting be on the list? Nowadays, hunting is not as cognitively demanding because it's more convenient and you're not sprinting. It's not to say hunting's not beneficial, but one, hunting is not necessarily accessible to everybody. It's not something I expect that you do 3 times a week for your exercise routine. But hey, if you're learning archery and things like that, I'm sure it's beneficial. But it's much easier nowadays. So thanks for asking that question. Now, what are the ingredients of ping pong that might make it beneficial for the brain? The neuro-ingredients, if it will. Well, on the upper right, open skill demands. We spend a lot of time defining and describing open skills. And open skill demands are really a component of ping pong that we would expect are present in this sport. Also, hand-eye coordination, I think that's no surprise. But the social and enjoyment factor in this visual-motor processing speed. So let's break that down. Visual means visual, the visual system, using your eyes. And the motor means using your body, reacting. So hand-eye coordination, another word for that is visual and motor, but how the information processes in your brain and how fast it processes in your brain, using the eyes, using the complex mechanisms in your brain, and then reacting to that stimulus. That's called visual motor processing speed. So these are the various ingredients in ping pong that might make it so beneficial for our brains. There's also some other cognitive demands that may be present in ping pong, as some researchers and experts have stated. Motor planning, attention, visuospatial, working memory, impulse control, processing speed, and coordination. I think most of these will be familiar to people, or at least apparent. And what's interesting is that with or without a neurological condition, some of these domains normally change or decline with age. So just like we would seek to do resistance training because we know we lose muscle mass as we age and we want to slow that or dampen that process, we should also recognize that certain cognitive abilities normally change with age, regardless of what condition or disease you might have. And so it behooves us to see if we can dampen or slow that process of these normal cognitive domains and try to use activities like ping pong to hopefully slow that process. Just a couple of statements about ping pong and cognition. So there was a study in 2014 showing that exercise duration and frequency did not influence cognition, but results indicated that table tennis exerted a greater influence on cognitive function than other types of exercise. Now, this is a potential victory for ping pong and those who are aficionados of it, but this was in frail older women, I believe, so we can't generalize this to everybody. And of course, the annoying statement after you find research that serves your bias is more research is needed. That's always unfortunate to hear, but that is true. But this was a very interesting finding. I believe it was in senior living with frail older women that ping pong apparently had a greater influence on cognition than other forms of exercise. And I believe they used aerobic training and dance as the comparisons. However, many of the benefits from ping pong on the brain are derived from expert models, meaning we study expert ping pong players and say, okay, their parts of the brain functionally or structurally have adapted, and try to translate that to the general population or special populations, or they're anecdotal. Much of this presentation is, I'll say that, so that we don't take everything as fact, or based on limited evidence. And this is why I love working with PPG, Ping Pong for Good, is because the goal is to facilitate more research in this topic. So while there's a lot of excitement, I think there's a lot of agreement about these potential benefits from experts and researchers all across the world, we do need more research, and that's why we need more funding to conduct this research. Dr. Daniel Amen, who's a celebrity psychiatrist, has stated some things about ping pong and the potential areas of the brain that it might affect. So let's explore some of those. And we will have some visuals on these areas of the brain. So the ping pong is great for hand-eye coordination and trains coordination and reflexes. The cerebellum, which is in the back of your brain, parietal lobe, which is in the posterior top of the brain. You have to focus using your prefrontal cortex, the front of your brain, so you can track the ball through space. Parietal lobes, use your vision, occipital lobes in the back, responsible for vision, figure out spins, plan shots and strategies. And so you can see there's a lot of theoretical different parts of the brain involved here. And you have to follow through and execute those tactics successfully using your prefrontal cortex and cerebellum, all the while staying calm so you don't get frustrated, your basal ganglia and what's called the anterior cingulate cortex, or ACC. And oh, there it is. And not dwell on the point that you blew a few minutes ago or get too frustrated. Temporal lobes, which houses the hippocampus, also responsible for emotional regulation. And to summarize, he says it's like aerobic chess. So lots of kind of potentially confusing and overwhelming brain regions. Not all of this is substantiated by research, but a very nice way to put the multi-level effects of ping pong on the brain potentially, and also a great metaphor, aerobic chess. I love that metaphor. So let's kind of go through, let's go through some of the areas of the brain that Dr. Amen was talking about. So occipital lobe in the back of your brain. So the frontal lobe is in the front. If you put your hand on your forehead, on your hand on your forehead there, occipital lobe is in the back. So visuospatial demands, the occipital lobe is responsible for vision and is also involved in coordination and visual motor reaction time. And so research has shown that older adults that play sports over the lifespan have greater occipital lobe volume than sedentary older adults. We're also assuming that activities that require vision and responding to hand-eye stuff is likely going to elicit more demands from this area. The cerebellum, also called the little brain, is an area in the back of your brain, a little bit lower behind your spinal cord there, behind your brainstem, responsible for skill and motor learning, coordinative exercise, but also open skill activities. And some animal studies have shown that the volume and the function of this area can change in response to those activities, as can the nerve cell and blood vessel volume in this area. It's a very dense area. So here's another highlight of the cerebellum, but also the basal ganglia, which is implicated in Parkinson's disease. Skill-based or neuromotor training seems to address these areas in a more specialized way than aerobic training might. We also have the parietal lobes, which is responsible for a lot of things. And so we would imagine that sensory-rich activities and object-based activities, as well as navigation of space, may improve the function and or structure of this network or this brain region. And then the frontal lobe, which houses these executive functions we keep talking about, is likely to be demanded with cognitively demanding activities, open skill activities. Resistance training has been found to affect the frontal lobe in mind-body exercise like yoga, tai chi, and qigong. We have a ping pong player here just for relevance, but we can appreciate that there's a lot of activities that can affect the frontal lobe. Dr. Wendy Suzuki, who's a very famous neuroscientist, says there's a lot of strategy in the area that gets enhanced in the prefrontal cortex, critical in playing ping pong, but also in chess. And so that's where that metaphor might also come from. And so we know that things like ping pong and resistance training even might improve executive functions in this because of the effect on this area. So as a summary, if we wanted to have a whole brain exercise program, I don't want this to overwhelm you. I don't want you to have to read anything here, but in detail, but we want a variety of activities. That's the summary of this. And ping pong can, yes, affect many different areas of the brain. And so we should see it as a valuable activity for that reason, but we also shouldn't be exclusive. We should incorporate mind-body exercise, neuromotor activities like ping pong, aerobic exercise, resistance training, and novel and stimulating and cognitively demanding activities for all the reasons we've stated thus far. So in summary, we have our brain health ingredients for your exercise program. At the very least, or at a high level, seek to incorporate resistance training, aerobic training, and skill-based exercise. Once again, that skill-based exercise category is synonymous for neuromotor exercise, motor, coordinative, dual task exercise. It's sort of an umbrella term. And just like there's different types of aerobic exercise and different types of resistance training, there's also different types of skill-based exercise. So these are your three ingredients. Just like we have carbs, fats, and proteins, we want skill, resistance, and aerobic in your exercise program if you care about your brain and body. And so there's a lot of ways to consume ping pong. There is a company called Ping-Pongly, which PPG has a relationship with, where you can convert any table to a ping pong table, which I think is very cool. Of course, on the lower left-hand side, you have your traditional ping pong table. On the upper right-hand side, we see ping pong in virtual reality, which I'm a big fan of. I don't have enough room in my my apartment in LA, so I use, and I'm a big gamer, if you probably could not tell, based on my history and my nerdy looks. And so I use virtual reality ping pong to play ping pong most of the time, because my fiance is sometimes annoyed with me and doesn't want to play ping pong with me. And so I use this to play with people all over the world, or play mini games, or play against robots or artificial intelligence, if you will. Very fun. In fact, some organizations are using ping pong for a ping pong tournament for Parkinson's disease, because we can't get together in the real world just yet. Of course, playing with yourself on the lower right-hand corner, just juggling, even if you don't have a table, just taking a ping pong paddle and taking a ping pong ball and juggling it on its own, or while doing exercise, or hitting it against a wall. There's a lot of therapeutic value there. And also it's a lot of fun. Sometimes I do that on phone calls, or I'll do it in between sets of my resistance training and do lunges or squats, or standing on one leg, or tandem stance. Of course, check with your exercise professional or doctor before you incorporate anything. Don't do this standing on one leg and fall and then blame me, please. If you're interested in things like Ping-Pongly, please sign up for Ping Pong for Good for discounts for our partners, things of this regard. So there's a lot of ways to consume this. There's not one way. And I think what's frustrating is when we hear about it, I'm like, okay, Ryan, we get it. It's beneficial potentially. How do I do it? And so these are just some ideas, and we'll keep coming to you with more ideas for how to consume this. How might you incorporate it into a multimodal exercise program, as we've stated? Well, we could, for example, have bikes and weights. I could do 30 minutes of an exercise bike and weightlifting for 30 minutes each, 60 minutes total, Mondays and Fridays, and do ping pong for 60 minutes Wednesday and Saturday. The intensity out of 10 is 10 being the highest, 1 being the least intense, if you will. So let's say Monday and Friday, it's 6 to 8, moderate to vigorous. And let's say Wednesday, Saturday, it's moderate, but it could get vigorous depending on your level of skill and who you're playing against and for how long and where. And so this is a multimodal exercise program that incorporates neuromotor training, in this case, ping pong, resistance training, and aerobic training, and meets the minimum requirements. So this is a sample beginner multimodal exercise program that incorporates ping pong. We also want to understand that there's variables in an exercise program that we can modify to make it right for us to continue to progress, and based on our goals. Frequency, how often do I do it? Duration, how long is it for? 20 minutes, 30 minutes, 60 minutes. Intensity, low, moderate, vigorous. The skill, is there skill involved, or am I focusing on something like running and that is the skill and I'm not trying to distract myself with more cognitive demands? How novel is it? And what's the environment? Am I indoor, outdoor, with someone, by myself, in virtual reality? So these are all the acute variables, if you will. Just like a diet has frequency, timing, amount, exercise also has its acute variables. And of course, there's a variety of other lifestyle factors. I'm not going to sit here and pretend that it's just about ping pong or physical activity. It's also about sleep, diet, stress management, managing medications, either managing polypharmacy, not taking too much or not taking what's unnecessary, or adhering to medications that a doctor has directed you to adhere to. The management or prevention of comorbidities like hypertension, for instance, cognitive stimulation, and of course, social support. This doesn't all have to exist within the context of just exercise. It just happens to be one of the best things that we can do for our brain that most people are not doing. So I'm done blabbing for now. We'll tend to the Q&A and chat. Please enter your questions or comments so that I can answer those there. If you have any questions, this is my email, ryan.glatt2@providence.org. You will receive a copy of this presentation, a recording of this presentation, and several other resources. I'm going to hand it back over to Maureen. I'm going to leave open this slide. Oh, and I think more importantly, you can always access me through PPG, of course. This is the most important information, not my direct email, but you can email info@pingpongforgood.org, follow Ping Pong for Good on the socials, and Maureen, why don't you take it away?
Thank you so much, Ryan. That was so informative. My brain is just like, it's so much great material. And thank you so much for going through the science in such a, accessible and awesome way. So thank you, Ryan. Really appreciate your partnership. So Ping Pong's for Good's mission is to get this word out, to let people know just how beneficial ping pong is on multiple fronts, social, mental, and physical, as you heard today. So we look forward to bringing more events to you, and we'll have, this is meant to be a educational one, but we will have more interactive events with special guests, so stay tuned. And we're just so appreciative of having all of you join us today, and we look forward to seeing you more in the future. And we appreciate any support that you'd like to from your partners, and we are available for partnerships, and looking forward to coming back. Thank you so much, and have a great afternoon, everybody.